Ever notice that some of the biggest battles inside the royal family never happen in public? There are no shouting matches, no dramatic press conferences, no official declarations of war. Instead, the most consequential conflicts are often fought through symbolism, protocol, carefully timed decisions, and sometimes a single piece of jewelry. And if recent reports are to be believed, one of the most fascinating royal power struggles of the modern era may have started exactly that way: a brooch, a coronation, a series of quiet administrative moves. And now, claims of a future royal framework that could dramatically reshape Queen Camilla's role when the next chapter of the monarchy begins. If even part of this narrative is true, the implications are enormous, because this isn't simply a story about Queen Camilla, it's a story about succession, power, legacy, and the future king who may already be quietly preparing for the day he takes the throne. Welcome to Royal Decode by Ima, where the royal tea is always fresh, hot, and served at the perfect temperature. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into it. For years, Queen Camilla's journey within the royal family has been one of the most remarkable transformations in modern royal history. There was a time when many believed public acceptance would never come. Yet over the years, she gradually became a recognized and established figure within the monarchy. But even as her position became more secure publicly, questions continued to linger behind the scenes. How much influence should a queen consort have? Where should the line between support and authority be drawn? And what happens when one reign eventually gives way to another? Those questions may sound simple. Inside a centuries-old institution like the British monarchy, they're anything but. Because royal life runs on tradition, and tradition is built on boundaries. When those boundaries appear to shift, people notice. Sometimes immediately, sometimes years later. And according to many royal commentators, the first major sign of trouble appeared in February 2023. At first glance, it was an ordinary royal engagement. Camilla arrived, greeted well-wishers, posed for photographs, and carried out her duties as expected. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed controversial. Yet among the photographs that emerged from that day was one detail that would later become the subject of intense discussion: a brooch. Now, for most of us, a brooch is simply an accessory, something decorative, something elegant. But inside royal circles, jewelry can carry layers of meaning that outsiders often miss. Every jewel has a history. Every piece tells a story, and sometimes those stories carry powerful symbolism. Certain royal observers argued that the brooch Camilla wore that day represented far more than fashion. They believed it touched upon symbols traditionally associated with sovereign authority. Whether that interpretation was fair or not remains open to debate. But what isn't debated is the reaction it generated among royal watchers. Questions began circulating. Was it intentional? Was it simply a personal choice? Or was it a subtle signal that only insiders would understand? Nobody outside the palace can say for certain. Yet many analysts now point back to that moment as the beginning of a timeline that would grow, increasingly complicated. Then came the coronation, a moment that was always destined to make history. The world watched as centuries of royal tradition unfolded before a global audience. Every detail was examined, every gesture analyzed, every item of clothing discussed, and once again, attention turned to royal jewels, particularly the diamonds incorporated into Camilla's coronation crown. To supporters, the choice represented continuity. To critics, it raised uncomfortable questions, because royal jewelry isn't merely valuable, it's emotional. These pieces are connected to generations of monarchs. They carry memories, associations, legacies. For many people, Queen Elizabeth II wasn't simply a monarch. She was a symbol of stability across 7 decades. Anything connected to her inevitably carries deep emotional significance. And according to royal commentators, the decisions surrounding the coronation jewels became another point of friction within certain royal circles. Whether those tensions were as serious as some reports suggest remains uncertain. But one thing is clear: the conversation didn't disappear. It only grew louder. As months passed, another factor began influencing the discussion: public opinion. In today's monarchy, popularity matters. Not because the crown is a popularity contest, but because public trust is one of its most important assets. Every senior royal understands this. Every future monarch understands this. Approval ratings may not determine who wears the crown, but they can influence how effectively the institution functions. And throughout modern royal history, public perception has often shaped private decisions in ways we don't fully understand until years later. This is where some analysts believe Prince William enters the story, not as a participant in public drama, but as a strategist. Because if there's one thing William has consistently demonstrated, it's patience. Unlike previous generations, he rarely engages publicly with controversy. He tends to think long term, and according to those who closely follow royal affairs, many of the developments we've seen over the past few years appear less like isolated incidents and more like pieces of a larger puzzle. A puzzle focused on the future, not the present. Then another key figure entered the picture, Prince Andrew. For years, Andrew's position within the monarchy had become increasingly controversial. His public role diminished, his influence declined, and many observers viewed his gradual removal from royal life as part of a broader effort to modernize the institution. But some commentators believe there was another consequence. Andrew had long been viewed as one of Camilla's strongest internal allies. Whether that characterization is accurate or exaggerated depends on the source. However, if such an alliance existed, its influence appeared to weaken significantly as Andrew's position continued to shrink. And that matters, because power inside institutions often depends not only on titles but on relationships. Allies matter, networks matter, support systems matter. When those systems weaken, influence can weaken too. And that appears to be exactly what some royal analysts believe happened. By 2026, observers began noticing something else, a visible shift in royal imagery. Now, this might sound insignificant, but inside the monarchy, imagery is often carefully managed. Photographs aren't always just photographs. They can communicate priorities, they can signal relationships, and sometimes they can reveal where an institution believes its future lies. One image in particular captured attention: the Easter service at Windsor. As cameras flashed and journalists documented the event, many royal watchers focused on the positioning of family members. William and Catherine stood prominently at the center, their children nearby. Other senior royals closely aligned. The message, at least visually, appeared clear: continuity, stability, the future. Meanwhile, commentators noted that Camilla appeared noticeably separate from the central grouping. Was it intentional, coincidental, or simply a product of logistics? Nobody outside the planning rooms knows for certain. But the image quickly became a talking point, because royal symbolism rarely goes unnoticed, and once people began discussing it, they couldn't stop. Before we continue, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think royal photographs genuinely send hidden messages? Or do royal watchers sometimes read too much into ordinary moments? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into the royal world, don't forget to subscribe to Royal Decode with Ima. We're here to unpack the stories, the symbolism, and the royal moments everyone is talking about. Now, let's continue. Then came the reports that truly ignited debate. Claims that Prince William had allegedly authorized a framework outlining how influence, access, and authority could be structured during a future reign. He has denied Camilla's close circle access and striped her of influential allies. The reports themselves generated enormous attention. Why? Because they suggest something much bigger than a disagreement between individuals. They suggest preparation for a new era, a new court, a new leadership structure, and perhaps a new vision of what the monarchy should look like in the decades ahead. If those reports are accurate, the focus isn't punishment, it's organization, it's succession planning, it's ensuring that authority remains clearly defined when power eventually changes hands. Supporters describe this as sensible governance. Critics view it as consolidation. Either way, it reveals something fascinating. The future monarchy may already be taking shape, long before the crown changes heads. When you step back and examine the entire timeline, a pattern begins to emerge. A controversial brooch, a coronation debate, shifting public sentiment, the decline of influential allies, strategic public imagery, and finally, reports of future administrative planning. Individually, each event can be explained away. Together, they form a narrative that has captivated royal observers around the world. And perhaps that's why this story continues to resonate. Because at its heart, it isn't really about jewelry, or seating arrangements, or even palace politics. It's about something much larger: the transfer of legacy from one generation to the next, the careful preparation for a future reign, and the reality that every monarchy must eventually confront change. The question now is not whether change is coming. Change always comes. The question is what that change will look like. Will future historians look back on these moments as ordinary royal speculation? Or will they see them as early signs of a transformation that was already quietly underway? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: the next chapter of the royal story is getting closer, and the entire world will be watching when it finally begins. Until the next cup of royal tea, take care.